Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd risk everything for love. Hell, I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall for someone so completely that breathing became optional. But here I am, telling you about Nina Robinson, the woman who turned my carefully constructed world upside down with nothing more than a red pen and a whisper. It started in that cramped writing workshop above the coffee shop on Fifth Street. You know, the kind mismatched chairs, the smell of burnt espresso seeping through the floorboards, and a handful of wannabe writers clutching their manuscripts like life preservers. I've been going there for 3 months, hoping someone would finally tell me my work was worth something. What I got instead was her. Nina walked in 20 minutes late, designer heels clicking against the worn linoleum, carrying herself like she owned not just the room but the entire block. The workshop leader, poor Gerald, practically genuflected when she introduced herself. Nina Robinson, she said, settling into the chair beside me. I'll be your guest mentor this evening. Robinson, as in Robinson Literary Foundation, as in the family that had been launching careers and crushing dreams in publishing for 3 generations. I should have been intimidated. Instead, I found myself studying the way she held her pen confident, almost predatory, like she was ready to bleed all over the page. Let's start with you, she said, and I realized she was looking directly at me. What's your name? Eleanor. Eleanor Whitaker. Well, Eleanor Whitaker, let's see what you've got. I slid my manuscript across the table with trembling fingers. She read the first page in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned closer, and I caught that inexpensive perfume mixed with something I couldn't identify. Something that made my pulse quicken. This line, she said, her voice low, meant only for me. It's almost brilliant. But you're holding back. Her fingers brushed mine as she took my pen, rewriting the sentence with a flourish. The contact sent electricity, shooting up my arm. I tried to focus on her words, on the way she transformed my clumsy metaphor into something that sang, but all I could think about was how close she was, how her breath felt against my ear. There, she said, sitting back. Now it has teeth. I glanced around the room and realized everyone was staring. Gerald looked like he'd witnessed a miracle. The other writers were scribbling notes, trying to capture whatever magic had just happened. But Nina's attention was entirely on me, and I felt exposed, raw, like she could see every doubt and desperate hope I'd ever harbored. After the workshop, she appeared beside me at the bar next door. I hadn't planned to go. I usually went straight home to my studio apartment and my microwave dinners, but somehow my feet had carried me there. She slid into the seat beside me, pushing a whiskey toward me without asking what I wanted. You write like someone who's felt things, she said, her voice carrying that same intimate tone from before. But you edit like you're scared of them. I took a sip of the whiskey, grateful for the burn. And you critique like someone who's never been told no. Her laugh was dark, delighted. She leaned closer, and I could see flecks of gold in her green eyes. Prove me wrong. That's how it started. 3 words that changed everything. The next weeks became a blur of late-night conversations and stolen glances. She'd show up at my apartment with takeout from expensive restaurants, claiming she needed to discuss my latest chapter. We'd sit on my secondhand couch, eating pad. Thai from containers that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, dissecting every line of my work until the words became meaningless, and all that mattered was the way she looked at me when I said something that surprised her. You have this way of seeing the world, she told me one night, her fingers tracing patterns on my coffee table. Like you're constantly discovering it for the first time. Maybe because I am, I said. Discovering things, I mean. She looked up then, and something passed between us, a recognition, maybe, or a question neither of us was ready to ask. The air grew thick with possibility. I wanted to reach for her, to test the boundaries of whatever this was, but I was paralyzed by the fear of misreading the moment. Instead, she gathered her things and left, leaving me with nothing but the lingering scent of her perfume and the feeling that I'd just missed something important. The workshops continued, but now they felt like elaborate performances. We'd sit across from each other, discussing other people's work with professional detachment, while conducting an entirely different conversation with our eyes. She'd suggest a different word choice, and I'd feel it like a caress. I'd ask a question about structure, and she'd smile in a way that made my chest tight. Gerald began pairing us for exercises. "You two have such interesting creative chemistry," he'd say, and I'd wonder if he could see what was happening between us, or if we were just that obvious. During one session, we were assigned to write a scene together, one person starting, the other finishing. Nina began with a description of a woman standing at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. When she handed me the pen, our fingers lingered together longer than necessary. I wrote about the woman's fear, her certainty that whichever path she chose would lead to loss. When I finished, Nina read it over my shoulder, so close I could feel her breath on my neck. "You're writing about yourself," she whispered. "Are we all?" She took the pen back and added a final paragraph, the woman choosing the path that scared her most, walking toward an uncertain future with her heart wide open. When she was done, she looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "Sometimes," she said, "the most terrifying choice is the only honest one." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her words, about the way she'd written, that ending like a challenge. I found myself walking through the city at 2 a.m., ending up outside the coffee shop where we'd first met. The building was dark, but I could see the light in the workshop room upstairs. Nina was there, sitting alone at our usual table, staring at a blank page. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. She looked up when I entered, unsurprised, as if she'd been waiting for me. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "I kept thinking about what you wrote." "About honest choices." She stood up, walking toward me with that same predatory grace I'd noticed the first night. "And what choice are you making, Eleanor?" My name on her lips was like a prayer and a curse. I reached for her then, my fingers tangling in her hair, pulling her close. She kissed me like she was claiming something that had always belonged to her, and I let her, because it had. We stumbled against the table, papers scattering to the floor. Her hands were in my hair, on my face, mapping the contours of my desire like she was memorizing them. I'd never been kissed like that before, like I was air and she was drowning. "I've been thinking about this," she whispered against my lips. "About you, since the first night." "Me too," I managed, though thinking was a generous description of the chaos in my head. She pulled back, studying my face. "You know, this is complicated." "I know. My family, my position people will have opinions." "I know." She smiled then, soft and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "You're very agreeable when you're turned on." I laughed, surprising myself. "You're very talkative when you're nervous." "I'm not nervous," she said, but her hands were shaking as she reached for me again. We kissed until the sun came up, until the coffee shop below us began to stir with morning customers. Then we walked to her penthouse apartment, hand in hand, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her place was everything mine wasn't: spacious, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But all I could focus on was the way she looked in the morning light, how her hair caught the sun, how her lips were still swollen from kissing me. "I should go," I said, though I made no move toward the door. "Should you?" she asked, stepping closer. People will wonder where I am. What people? I couldn't answer because the truth was, there weren't many people who would notice or care. I had Marcus, my best friend from college, who called once a week to check on me. I had my part-time job at the bookstore where my absence would be noted but not mourned. I had a life that felt small and provisional, like I was waiting for permission to start really living. Stay, she said, and it wasn't a request. So I did. We spent the day in her bed, talking and touching and discovering each other with the desperate intensity of people who'd been waiting their entire lives for this moment. She told me about growing up in the shadow of her family's expectations, about the pressure to carry on a legacy she'd never asked for. I told her about my dreams, about the novel I'd been writing for 3 years, but was too scared to show anyone. Fear, she said, tracing circles on my bare shoulder, is just another word for potential. Is that what this is, potential? Among other things. The weeks that followed were a fever dream of stolen moments and secret glances. She'd text me addresses, galleries, restaurants, bookstores, and I'd find her waiting, always with that same half smile that made my knees weak. We'd spend hours walking through the city, talking about everything and nothing, our fingers intertwined like we were afraid of letting go. But it was the quiet moments that undid me. The way she'd curl against me while I read, her head on my shoulder, making small sounds of contentment. The way she'd leave books on my nightstand, not just any books, but ones she'd chosen specifically for me, with passages underlined and notes in the margins. The way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't watching, like she was solving a puzzle she'd been working on her entire life. I was falling and falling hard, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to catch myself. Then Marcus showed up at my apartment with that damn brochure. The Robinson Literary Grant, he said, slapping it down on my coffee table like evidence in a trial. Full funding plus career launch. This is it, Al. This is your shot. I picked it up with trembling hands, scanning the details. It was everything I'd dreamed of: a year of financial support, mentorship from industry professionals, guaranteed publication consideration. It was the key to the life I'd always wanted. Then I saw the eligibility requirements. Engaged or married, I read aloud. Applicants must be engaged or married to demonstrate stability and commitment. Archaic, right? Marcus said, settling into my couch like he'd made himself at home. But who cares? You find some guy, make it official for a year, get your career launched, then go back to being single. It's not like you're seeing anyone seriously. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought about Nina, about the way she'd held me the night before, about the promises we'd whispered in the dark. Not like I was seeing anyone seriously. I can't, I said. Can't what? Al, this is $100,000 plus industry connections. You'd be crazy not to apply. I can't fake a relationship for money. It's not fake if it gets you what you want. Look, I know this guy from work. The door opened. Nina stood there, holding 2 coffees, her face brightening when she saw me. Then she noticed Marcus, noticed the brochure in my hands, and her expression shifted to something careful and unreadable. Hi, she said, her voice perfectly polite. I'm Nina. Marcus, he replied, standing to shake her hand. Elle's best friend. She looked at me then, and I saw the question in her eyes. I wanted to tell her everything about the grant, about Marcus's suggestion, about how the thought of pretending to love someone else made me physically ill. But the words stuck in my throat, and all I could do was stare at her like a deer in headlights. I should go, she said, setting the coffees on the counter. I'll call you later. But she didn't call. And when I called her, she didn't answer. 3 days passed in silence. I threw myself into my work, trying to lose myself in the fictional world I'd created, but every word felt hollow. I'd written a love story, I realized, and now I was living one, and I was about to destroy it for the sake of my career. On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to her penthouse using the key she'd given me weeks earlier. She was standing by the windows, looking out at the city, a glass of wine in her hand. "You're avoiding me," I said. "I'm giving you space to think." "About what?" She turned around, and I saw the hurt in her eyes that she'd been trying to hide. "About whether you're going to marry some stranger for a scholarship." "Nina, no, let me finish." She set down her wine, walking toward me with that same predatory grace, but now it felt different, dangerous. "I heard your conversation with Marcus. I know what you're considering. It's not what you think, isn't it? You're willing to fake a relationship for money, for career advancement. So tell me, Eleanor, what makes what we have any different?" The question hung between us like a blade. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that what we had was real, that I'd choose her over any scholarship or career opportunity. But the words wouldn't come because part of me, the part that had been struggling and scraping for years, couldn't help but wonder if she was right. "You don't understand," I said finally. "You've never had to fight for anything. You've never had to choose between love and survival." Her laugh was bitter. "You think I don't know what it's like to be reduced to a name, to have people assume I didn't earn my place? You think I don't know what it's like to wonder if someone loves me or what I can do for them? That's not, isn't it? Because right now, it feels like you're calculating whether I'm worth more than a scholarship." The accusation hit me like a slap. I stepped closer, anger rising in my chest. "You want to know what I'm calculating? I'm calculating whether you'll still want me when I'm broke and unknown. Whether this thing between us can survive in the real world, where I can't afford to eat at the restaurants you take me to, where I have to work 3 jobs just to make rent. So that's what this is about? Money? It's about security. It's about not having to depend on anyone else for my happiness. Including me?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with everything we'd been dancing around for weeks. I wanted to tell her no, that I didn't want to depend on her, that I wanted to build something equal, something real. But the truth was more complicated than that. "I don't know," I said honestly. Something shifted in her expression, disappointment, maybe, or recognition. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "Let me ask you something," she said, her voice soft but dangerous. "When you're with me, when I'm touching you, when I'm looking at you like you're the only person in the world, does it feel fake?" My breath caught. "No. When you write about love now, do you think about me?" "Yes. When you imagine your future, am I in it?" The question was a trap, and we both knew it. Because the answer was yes, God help me, yes. But admitting it meant admitting that I was willing to risk everything for something I wasn't sure I deserved. "Yes," I whispered. She kissed me then, hard and desperate, like she was trying to brand herself on my soul. I kissed her back with equal fervor, my hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. We stumbled toward the couch, clothes disappearing in a trail behind us. This time was different, more urgent, more desperate, like we were both afraid it might be the last time. She mapped my body with her hands and mouth, claiming every inch of me, and I let her because I wanted to belong to her, because I wanted to belong to someone who saw me as more than my potential. Afterward, we lay tangled together, our breathing slowly returning to normal. Rain had started to fall outside, pattering against the windows in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. "I have to apply," I said into the darkness. She stiffened beside me. "I know, but I don't want to fake it with some guy." "Then don't." I turned to look at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, propping herself up on her elbow, that the application doesn't specify gender. It just says engaged or married. The implication hit me like a freight train. Nina, think about it. We're already together. We care about each other. It wouldn't be fake. But your family, we'll deal with it. They've been pushing me to settle down anyway. And you need this grant. She reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. It could work. I wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw myself into her arms and damn the consequences. But something held me back, the same fear that had been paralyzing me for weeks. What if it doesn't work? I asked. What if we're just caught up in the excitement of something new, and 6 months from now, we realize we don't actually know each other? Then we'll figure it out, together. And if your family cuts you off, if the foundation board objects, then we'll figure that out too. She made it sound so simple, so inevitable. But I knew it wasn't. I knew that choosing her meant choosing uncertainty, choosing to build something from scratch without a safety net. And I also knew that choosing the scholarship meant choosing security over love, career over heart. I need time to think, I said. She nodded, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Of course. But time was exactly what I didn't have. The grant application was due in 2 weeks, and Marcus had already set up a meeting with his friend from work, a perfectly nice guy who was willing to enter a fake engagement for mutual benefit. He was a junior partner at a law firm, stable and successful, exactly the kind of person the scholarship committee would approve of. I met him at a coffee shop downtown, studying his earnest face as he explained how the arrangement would work. 6 months engaged, married for the duration of the grant year, then a quiet divorce. No complications, no feelings, just mutual professional benefit. It's really quite simple, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. We make a few public appearances, maintain the facade for the application process, then go back to our separate lives. I get the networking opportunities, you get the grant. Win-win. I stared at him, trying to imagine introducing him to Nina, trying to imagine kissing him at our fake wedding while she watched from the audience. The thought made me physically ill. I can't, I said, standing abruptly. I'm sorry, but I can't. He looked confused, but not particularly disappointed. If you change your mind, but I was already walking away, pulling out my phone to call Nina. I needed to tell her I'd made my choice, that I'd rather be broke and unknown with her than successful and miserable without her. She didn't answer. I tried again, then again. Finally, I took a cab to her penthouse, but the doorman told me she wasn't home. I waited in the lobby for 3 hours before giving up. The next morning, I saw her picture in the society pages. She was at some charity gala, looking stunning in a midnight blue gown, smiling for the cameras. The caption mentioned her recent engagement to a prominent businessman, someone from her world, someone appropriate. I stared at the photo until the words blurred together, until I couldn't tell if I was crying or just losing my mind. She'd moved on. While I was agonizing over our future, she'd chosen someone else, someone who could give her what she needed without all the complications I brought to the table. I threw the newspaper in the trash and called Marcus. Set up another meeting, I said, with your friend. I'll do it. The next few days passed in a haze of practical arrangements. David the lawyer was efficient and professional, laying out the terms of our fake relationship like a business contract. We'd get engaged immediately, married within the month, and maintain the facade for exactly 1 year. He had his own apartment, his own life, his own secrets to maintain. It was perfect, really. Clean and simple and utterly without feeling. I submitted the grant application on the deadline, our fake engagement photos attached like evidence of my respectability. Then I waited. The Robinson Foundation's annual gala was the night before the grant winners were announced. I hadn't planned to go. I couldn't afford the ticket, and I couldn't bear the thought of seeing Nina with her new fiancé. But David insisted. We need to be seen, he said, especially if you win tomorrow. So I let him buy me a dress, something sleek and black. That made me look like someone I didn't recognize. I let him escort me to the ballroom, his hand possessive on my lower back, and I smiled and nodded as he introduced me to his colleagues. But all I could think about was Nina. She was across the room, radiant and emerald green, her mystery fiancé. Nowhere to be seen. Our eyes met once, briefly, and I saw something flicker in her expression, surprise, maybe, or hurt. Then she turned away, and I felt something break inside my chest. The ceremony began. CEO Robinson took the stage, his voice booming across the ballroom as he talked about the Foundation's mission, about supporting the next generation of literary talent. I half listened, my attention focused on Nina, on the way she held herself like she was made of glass. This year's recipient of the Robinson Literary Grant, he announced, is Eleanor Whitaker. The applause was thunderous. David squeezed my hand, beaming like a proud husband. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, like all my sacrifices had been worth it. Instead, I felt hollow. I walked to the stage on unsteady legs, accepting the plaque with numb fingers. The CEO shook my hand, posed for photos, said something about my bright future. But all I could see was Nina standing in the crowd, her face a mask of polite congratulations. I'd like to thank my fiancé, I said into the microphone, the words, tasting like ash, for his support, and I stopped. The room was quiet, waiting. I looked at David, at his expectant face, at the future we'd negotiated like a business deal. Then I looked at Nina, and I saw something in her eyes that made my heart stop. Hope. I can't, I said into the microphone. I can't accept this. Gasps rippled through the audience. The CEO's face darkened. David looked like he'd been struck by lightning. I can't accept this, I repeated, my voice growing stronger, because the conditions are wrong. Because being forced to lie about who I love, about who I am, isn't worth any amount of money or career advancement. The room erupted in murmurs. I saw reporters scribbling notes, saw board members whispering urgently to each other. But I only had eyes for Nina, who was pushing through the crowd toward the stage. The woman I love, I continued, is standing right there. And I'd rather be broke and unknown with her than successful and miserable without her. Nina reached the stage, her face luminous with tears. She climbed the steps, ignoring the chaos around us, and took my hands. You magnificent idiot, she whispered. There is no fiancé. There never was. That photo was from last year. I had them rerun it to make you jealous. You what? I wanted to see what you'd choose. I wanted to know if you'd fight for us. That's insane. I know. I'm sorry. But Eleanor, you just chose me in front of 300 people. You just chose us. The CEO was shouting something about propriety and tradition, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was Nina, on the way she was looking at me like I'd just given her the world. I choose you, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I choose this. I choose us. She kissed me then, right there on the stage, in front of everyone. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The chaos that followed was spectacular. Board members resigned in protest. Conservative donors threatened to pull their funding. The story made headlines in the literary world and beyond. Author rejects grant, chooses love. But not everyone was scandalized. Marcus started a slow clap that spread through the room. Other young writers began to cheer. And in the back of the ballroom, I saw Gerald from the writing workshop, grinning like a proud father. Within a week, 3 other literary foundations had reached out, offering grants with no strings attached. A publisher expressed interest in my novel. A documentary crew wanted to film our story. But none of that mattered as much as the moment when Nina and I stood in that empty ballroom, still in our formal wear, laughing at the absurdity of it all. So, she said, straightening, my tie, what now? Now? Now we write our own story. A year later, we opened the Whitaker and Robinson Literary Collective in a converted warehouse downtown. It was part bookstore, part workshop space, part gallery for emerging writers. We had a wall of rejection letters, our wall of no's, that grew daily as we submitted work and supported other writers through their journeys. I never did get that grant, but I didn't need it. What I found instead was something infinitely more valuable, a partner who saw my potential and helped me realize it, a love that made me braver than I'd ever been alone, and a story that was entirely our own. The workshop still meets every Thursday night in the same room where we first met. Sometimes I catch Nina watching me from across the circle, that same predatory smile playing at her lips, and I remember what it felt like to be drowning in want and possibility. You know, she said one evening as we locked up the shop, I never did finish critiquing that first story of yours. Oh? What was your final verdict? She pulled me close, her fingers tangling in my hair. That you were holding back, but not anymore. And she was right. I'd stopped holding back the moment I chose her, the moment I chose us, the moment I realized that the best stories aren't the ones we force, they're the ones we live with our hearts wide open and our hands intertwined, walking toward an uncertain future together. The sign above our door reads, write your own ending, and every day that's exactly what we do.